the UDM National Treasurer, Thandi Nondenja. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Obviously, not an easy decision by the IEC. What's your reaction to this?
Thank you so much for having us. Our reaction is that we welcome the decision of the IEC. We commend the work of the commission of the Judge Moseneke on their recommendations. We feel that the UDM is vindicated because this is what we've been calling for, to say the environment is not conducive. Even the February, we still don't think will be convenient, but 99.9% of the parties today in our NPLC called for a flexible situation where when the IEC apply for the extension or the postponement, it must be a flexible one up to April at least. We are looking at saying the vaccination, the Department of Health has to up its performance on the vaccination so that the lockdown can be relaxed, because the processes on the ground, on the political parties, is far behind. You cannot call gatherings where you are going to choose your candidates and all that because of the limitations of the COVID-19 regulations. So we are saying they must work hand in hand with the IEC and assist the IEC by pushing up on the vaccination. Then we know that the voters are safe. It's no longer the issue of free and fair. It's free, fair, and safe, because the voters must be safe.
No, absolutely. But the question then stems, ma'am, while we know that Justice Moseneke weighed heavily on saving the lives of the potential voter, there's also the question that come the 1st of November, current municipal council will cease to exist. From a political front, what happens in that space?
Well, this pandemic is the first thing that happens in this country. So it tells us one thing, that our laws are not cast on stones. When we face disasters, we must always have the plan B in place. So they will have to go back to the courts. So the courts must rule on saying what happens now with the end of the terms. Must they continue? It must be something that is going to be worked on. But we cannot say because the term is ending, let the people be exposed to a risk of being infected by this pandemic. They have to find a way of overcoming that. They can extend, as they are postponing the elections, they can extend the term. The courts must decide together with the parliament.
Ma'am, thank you for so much for your time this afternoon and your reaction. UDM National Treasurer Thandi Nondenja obviously welcoming that decision by the IEC. Well, let's welcome via Zoom now DA National Spokesperson Siviwe Gwahube. Siviwe, ma'am, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, I know you were very much opposed to the IEC postponing the elections. What's your reaction this afternoon?
Thank you, and good afternoon to your viewers. As we've said, and we've been unequivocal, as you've now repeated yourself, we've been unequivocal about the fact that we've always been of the view that the local government elections and any other elections really in the country are not subject to simply extending terms, because the Constitution is quite clear that the term of any council, the term of any parliament is exactly 5 years. And the president then has 3 months to be able to determine or pronounce on the election. And so we've noted the decision by the IEC to fully adopt the Moseneke report. But now what becomes really, really important for us is how and the mechanism that the IEC and the courts of choice that they will be approaching will be doing this. Because, of course, what we want to make sure is that whatever mechanism is being used, we want to make sure that it is consistent with the Constitution. We want to make sure that, in fact, not a dangerous precedent of postponing elections for whatever reason is not set. And so we will be keeping a very close eye on the process that the IEC now undertakes to be able to pursue this matter. As we've said, we've made our submissions to the IEC. We have said what we think should happen in order to protect South Africans as we go to the polls. However, the IEC has chosen to adopt this report. And so now, because we are fully invested in this process, we will be taking part in it and making sure that whatever steps now that the IEC takes are in fact in line with the Constitution and do not set a bad or at least a dangerous precedent of postponing elections on a whim.
Ms. Gwahube, while your point is very, very solid and clear, because constitutionally these elections need to take place at a particular time, particularly after that 90-day, where the current councillors are currently in place. But you have to understand also that, or appreciate rather, that this decision by Justice Moseneke wasn't taken lightly. I mean, after extensive consultation, it became very evident that the livelihoods from a safety perspective was very, very important. What would you have liked to have seen happen, and how would you have handled that?
Look, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, as the Democratic Alliance, we fully appreciate that lives must be conserved at all times. But that is why also what we did was we put together a very comprehensive submission to the IEC to say to them, firstly, we are in this with you. We view ourselves as leaders in this process, and therefore we want to make valuable inputs on how we can make sure that we are within the constitutional framework of holding an election, but at the same time, we look after saving lives. And so we made various proposals around how the IEC can expand some of the mechanisms that they use during the by-elections to keep voting stations safe. We made proposals around how we can make sure that the registration weekend is held. And we also made a point to say that political parties' readiness should not determine whether or not South Africans go to the polls. The reality is that South Africans need to have a chance to be able to renew and refresh the mandate of their local representatives. However, the IEC is the custodian of the election and the election process. And one of the things we were also unequivocal about is that should the IEC guarantee us a free and fair and a safe election, we will be supporting them. But now that they've said that they simply they support the Moseneke Commission, the Moseneke report, we now have to look very closely as how the mechanism that they're going to use, because that then becomes the nub of the issue. Because we simply cannot, we will postpone the elections now due to a pandemic. What is to stop a precedent from being followed again for another reason? And so that is why we've got to make sure that consistently and constitutionally we are well within the bounds of what needs and can happen.
Ms. Gwahube, let me thank you for your time. This is where we have to leave it for this afternoon. Thank you so much for your input. That was the DA's Siviwe Gwahube. Well, we are getting analysis from various political parties. This, of course, follows the IEC's unanimous acceptance of the recommendations of the Moseneke report. We're now joined by COPE National Spokesperson, Mr. Dennis Bloem. Mr. Bloem, thank you so much for your time. Perhaps let me get your reaction about the IEC decision.
Good afternoon, Unati. Now, let me tell you, we are saying that this decision of the IEC is in the best interest of the country. It is a sober decision to adopt and accept the Moseneke report to postpone the local government election to February. We will now wait, like the IEC is going to the courts for an order, and then we will see what will happen at that time. But we are saying it is a very sober decision that the IEC took to accept and adopt that report. You see, Unati, we must be very, very, very sensitive to what is happening in the country. COVID-19 is real. The report of a retired Deputy Chief Justice was based on expert and scientific advice, and not to have this election in October. And we are accepting it. We were a party that was saying that we will oppose any postponement. But reality is that this COVID-19 is causing havoc in the country. Many people are dying. So we must be very sensitive when we are dealing with the lives of human beings. It is very important that we take that into consideration.
Right, Mr. Bloem, thank you so much for your analysis and your reaction. We now bring in Naren Singh, the IFP Chief Whip in Parliament. Mr. Singh, thank you so much for your time, your reaction this afternoon.
Well, thank you very much, Unati, and good afternoon to you and your viewers. Well, we really welcome the fact that the IEC has agreed to accept and adopt the report that was tabled by Deputy Chief Moseneke, because we believe the report in the first instance ensured that there was widest consultation. It was a 120-page report, and it was made, on very, very pragmatic grounds. So we are pleased that they've accepted the report and the recommendations.
I don't know how much of the previous interviews you've managed to hear, many of them saying, obviously, that COVID-19 is a reality. Another reality is, come the 1st of November, the current municipal councillors, their legal mandate to function doesn't exist after that. Are you concerned?
No, we're not concerned. You see, we must be realists, and I would like to appeal to all political parties. Let's be realistic. Nobody expected COVID-19. Nobody expected the impact of COVID-19 that we are currently experiencing. Nobody expected that there will be different variations of COVID. And I think in as much as we all belong and subscribe to the Constitution of South Africa, we have to be pragmatic, we have to be realistic. And we think that protection of lives must trump any other consideration. Of course, we cannot do anything outside of the Constitution. The Constitution is something drafted by us. It was drafted by the Constitutional Assembly. And if there's need be to amend any section of the Constitution so that we can ensure that the safety of all South Africans in this process of election is ensured, then we must do that. I don't think there's any need for us to be reluctant about what we need to do, and we must move forward. But we also expect the IEC to ask Justice Moseneke to reassess the situation within a month or two, because elections are not an event. Elections is a process, and like my colleague from the UDM said, political parties need to prepare for elections. We need to be on the ground. We need to select our candidates. We have rallies, because that's the way elections happen. Campaigning for elections happen in South Africa, and they will need to give us enough time for us to be able to do those things. But all in all said, we cannot believe that we must use South Africans as voting fodder just for the sake of, the Constitution.
Mr. Singh, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Naren Singh, the IFP Chief Whip in Parliament. Now, let's get analysis. We joined on via Zoom by Lehlohonolo Letele, is the Electoral Systems Officer at My Vote Counts. Mr. Letele, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, obviously, it wasn't it was a very difficult decision, not an easy one by the IEC. But perhaps talk to me about what the consequences of postponing the elections, given the current state of affairs at local government specifically. Of course, we know that the IEC will be approaching the courts soon.
Good afternoon, Lunati, and good afternoon to the viewers. I think you're right. It was not an easy decision to make, and the recommendation is rational. Given the threat of COVID-19 and the current restriction on political activity. But the problem comes in with regards to the local government and the state of local government at the moment. people will feel deprived of their right to kind of elect their representative where it matters the most. There's quite a lot of issues with regards to service delivery at the local government, issues of provision of water, provision of electricity, and so forth. So postponing might agitate the voters, or maybe even encourage voter apathy, where people decide not to vote because of the constant changes of the election date, or rather the postponement to next year.
Ms. Lisela, I hope you've got a very good sense of humor. I called you Mr. Apologies for that. But perhaps let's continue with the interview now. What are the steps that are likely to follow after this decision by the IEC?
I didn't catch that, so the apology accepted. Look, the IEC has just tabled two options that they have with regards to moving forward, which is one, approaching the electoral court, or either approaching the constitutional court. So what follows that the electoral court has never seen a case of this nature. There has never been a precedent for postponing the elections due to a global pandemic such as this one. So there's really no guarantee as to how inclined the court will be on this case, and whether there might be any political parties that might want to contest the recommendation by Moseneke. The second option, which is approaching the Constitutional Court, also might be problematic in the instance that the process is going to take a bit of time to table it to the Constitutional Court, and it's going to go back to the National Assembly where a majority is required, which is 75% to decide on the motion to postpone. So we know that the political parties are divided on the issue of postponing the election. So what happens then when we come back to Parliament and parties still don't agree on postponing the election? So that's kind of may lead to certain political uncertainty, during that time. So we're facing quite a precarious period going forward. So we really don't know. And there's issues of accountability as well. I mean, what happens post the 1st of November? You rightfully said that the municipal councils cease to exist. Their legal mandate is over. So how do we ensure accountability beyond the 1st of November? Those are certain issues that the IEC needs to look into and consider while they engage on the legal route that they've decided to embark on.
Ms. Lisela, I know we spoke about, just struggling municipalities and what this potentially means. We know that come the 1st of November, whilst I've spoken to a number of opposition parties this afternoon, many of them obviously welcoming this IEC decision, not a lot of them being concerned about, come the 1st of November, the current councillors who are in place will cease to exist and lose all mandate that is bestowed onto them. How quickly can we finalize these proceedings before the 1st of November?
I think it's possible. The constitutional amendment might take 3 months, so we're looking at August, September, October. So it might be possible that we can get a clear action from that, and also the electoral court, pending that there is no agent applications against the IEC's decision to do so. I think it's possible that we might have a legal reproach, to have the existing councils to remain in place until we have the polls next year. So it's just a matter of time and working quickly. Before the municipal councils collapse, because that might spell anarchy should 1st of November come and this whole thing is still hanging in the air or suspended in the air.
Now, in making his decision, or announcing it rather, Justice Moseneke said that elections are likely to be free and fair if held no later than the end of February 2022. I would imagine he was taking into consideration that come next year, around that time, at least 40% of South Africans will be vaccinated around that time. What happens if that's not the case?
I mean, that's the thing, it's a bit of speculation that maybe things might be better in February, but what happens come February and our vaccination rollout is at the same pace that it still is? You have a situation where you're entering a cycle of constant postponement, and that will take citizens where you are saying February, but you are not reassuring us that come February, if this does not happen, what is the alternative? We need to know, okay, come February, this is what will be done. This is how we're going to have safe voting. This is how we're going to have secure voting, and that has not been said. That has not been clear from the IEC. So that needs to be resolved now, so that we avoid a situation where come February it's not possible to have the elections, and people need to understand that that's not possible, and then we don't end up in a state of political unrest because of decisions were made immediately without appropriate consultation, and that might lead to political unrest.
Now, in terms of the voting process itself, we know that municipal elections garner a very low turnout as opposed to your national or provincial elections per se. What is the safest thing to do currently for political parties that had geared themselves up for October and obviously in anticipation of trying to garner as much support as visibly possible for these municipal elections?
I mean, the COVID-19 has really unleveled the playing field for political parties. We know they are different in terms of resources, in terms of reach, and in terms of capacity. So it's really not fair at the moment. That's why I think one of the recommendations was to postpone, bearing in mind the restrictions. But I mean, I think it's time for them to be innovative. It's time for them to go digitally and engage with the voters. You need to try other mechanism. It's not possible to conduct a door-to-door campaign. So try your WhatsApps, try and formulate on WhatsApp. There's Twitter Spaces, a platform for people to engage. So there's absolutely nothing that political parties can do, because by nature, the voting process or the pre-election process is physical, so that is not possible at the moment. I think it's time for political parties to be innovative and try something different.
All right, thank you so much for your time. That was Lehlohonolo Letshele, the Electoral Systems Officer at My Vote Counts.